So Jane Austen's novel Persuasion is replete with doubling, uh, generally in the form of repetition of names, repetition of characters, repetition of events. One could say that the primary tension in Persuasion is between repetition and redemption. And of course, these two terms apply to Anne Elliot. Anne is in a situation where she does not want to repeat again what happened 8 years earlier with Captain Wentworth. When they are first together, when she's 19, obviously their engagement is broken because she's persuaded by Lady Russell to break the engagement. 8 years later, she sees a possibility of reuniting with Wentworth, fears a repetition of what happened 8 years earlier, and desires redemption. If you can think of redemption as the repetition of an action, but with something new added, and with something new added that is positive. So Anne, in a way, if she can marry Captain Wentworth, can redeem her past. And that's really what the novel is largely about. Can Anne recover what has been lost? And for much of the novel, the answer seems to be no. Remember, early in the novel, more than once it is said that she has lost her bloom, which of course would be shorthand for not only youthful vigor, but also hope and pliability and faith. When the bloom goes, one is just kind of locked into a sort of monotony, and certainly Anne faces that possibility. The counter to the possibility that Anne has lost her bloom is this lovely sentence early in the novel, which goes like this: Anne had been forced into prudence in her youth. She learned romance as she grew older, the natural sequel of an unnatural beginning. So the prudence that she practices early in her life is unnatural, according to the narrator, but a natural outcome of that unnatural beginning is that her hope for a recovery of bloom takes the form of belief in romance, which is not only a belief in romance in terms of love with a partner, but also romance as a kind of hope for a redeemed life, a life that is happy. So let's think about this. How does doubling work in connection with this tension between repetition and redemption? So think of all the repeated names in the novel. We have, just to begin with, early in the novel, when Sir Walter is looking through the Baronet Guide, he says, "Oh, all the various Elliot men over the years have married all the Marys and Elizabeths," suggesting that there have been many Elizabeths and many Marys in this family history. We have Sir Walter Elliot as the leader of the family, and the heir to him would be William Walter Elliot, Mr. Elliot in the novel. So we have two Walter Elliots there. We have Charles Musgrove, who marries Anne's younger sister Mary. Charles Musgrove's son is named Charles as well. Henrietta, Charles's sister, will marry a man named Charles. And bizarrely enough, Miss Smith's dead husband is also named Charles. So we have a lot of repetition of names here, again suggesting the possibility that the world can be one of repetition, monotony, a kind of death in a way. I mean, and that's really what's suggested about the world of landed gentry. We have two different worlds of let's say, professions. We have the landed gentry world, which is having no profession at all, but simply wanting to repeat one's name over and over again, repeat one's bloodline over and over again. And that world, symbolized by Sir Walter, is vapid and superficial. On the other hand, we have the world of the Navy. We have Captain Wentworth, who, though born without any kind of social rank, through his work, through his courage, is able to create for himself an identity of status and worth, but also he lives a life of constant change, constant adventure, constant variation. So, other doubling. Louisa and Henrietta Musgrove, sorry, seem almost interchangeable. Early in the novel, when Wentworth is courting them, there's really a sense that we can't really tell the difference between one and the other. So names, people repeat, but also events repeat. And this is a very important kind of plot point in the novel. Early on, Anne is staying with her sister Mary. Mary's child Charles hurts himself, and she stays home with the boy when Anne and Charles Sr. go out to a dinner where they meet Captain Wentworth. So Anne is kept away from meeting Captain Wentworth for the first time because of a fall. Then, when Louisa Musgrove falls, note that her falling is a kind of doubling. She jumps down to Wentworth one time and then insists doing it a second time. When she does hit her head and is knocked unconscious, then her sister Henrietta falls, and the townspeople in Lyme think, oh, there are two dead ladies. All kinds of doubling. But Louisa's fall in the middle of the novel rekindles Wentworth's affection for Anne as he sees how quick and resourceful and authoritative she is in the midst of this crisis. So we have one fall excluding Anne from Wentworth, another fall connecting Anne with Wentworth. And of course, the main repetition in the plot is the repetition of Anne and Wentworth when she's 19, and then 8 years later, Anne and Wentworth bonding together. So it seems to me that the doubling suggests one of two possibilities. That doubling can suggest mere repetition, which is the world of landed gentry for the most part. And this is a world that is vapid and dead. But doubling can also suggest, as I said earlier, the possibility of redemption, which means not mere repetition, but repetition with a change, repetition with a difference. And that's what happens the second time around for Anne, when she repeats the courting with Wentworth, but this time there's a difference, that she successfully is able to marry him, and in doing so her bloom is fully recovered. In doing so, her romance is kindled. But, and this is where the novel is ambiguous, and I talked in my other two lectures about various ambiguities in the novel. By the time we get to the end of the novel, there's not a clear sense that, okay, everything's all wrapped up. There's a sense that a new cycle of repetitions could begin endlessly. There will always be repetitions. There will always be the possibility for redemption or the failure for redemption. In other words, it's not a typical Jane Austen novel when we think of, say, Emma or Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice, which have fairly traditional, let's call them happy endings. And by the time we get into the book, we feel like, oh, great. These people who are getting married are suited for one another. They're going to be great. But how does Persuasion end? Well, Anne tells Captain Wentworth, well, you know what? I was wrong to be persuaded not to marry you all those years ago. But at the same time, I was right to be persuaded not to marry you all those years ago because the persuasion was on the side of safety. So there's not this sense of this nice clarity of perfect understanding at the end of the novel. Anne's position on what happened 8 years earlier is complicated. Moreover, the novel ends with, yes, Anne and Wentworth are going to be together. He's in the Navy. She's going to be with him, perhaps even out at sea. But they always have to be ready for quick alarm. In other words, another war could break out at any moment. And who knows what that will cause? Who knows what kind of separations and possible reconciliations that will cause? So the point is, it's not a kind of a self-contained novel with what we call traditional closure. It's a novel that begins with new openings, new beginnings, which could suggest new cycles of repetition, but hopefully of redemption.